travel far to be right here where we are. Reach out a hand, no need to fear, 'cause all we need is right here. All we need, all we need, all we need is right here. All we need, all we need, all we need is right here. The night was dark, but the day is bright. Together we can lift our eyes to all we love and we hold dear, 'cause all we need is right here. Sing it. All we need, all we need, all we need is right here. All we need, all we need, all we need is right here. All we need, all we need, all we need is right here.
Our opening words this morning come from Polly Horvath, award-winning children and youth author. She writes this quote, and I think it's an aspiration of what we would all like. We all belong here equally. Just by being born onto the earth, we are accepted and the earth supports us. We don't have to be especially good. We don't have to accomplish anything. We don't even have to be healthy.
Hi, this is hymn number 188. Those of you who are regular UU attenders know this round. So just pick a part and sing along, please.
Come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, whoever you are, ours is no caravan, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come.
Thank you.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our great covenant.
They say that freedom is a constant struggle. They say that freedom is a constant struggle. They say that freedom is a constant struggle. Oh Lord, we struggle so long. We must be free, we must be free. They say that freedom is a constant sorrow. They say that freedom is a constant sorrow. They say that freedom is a constant sorrow. Oh Lord, we struggle so long. We must be free, we must be free. They say that freedom is a constant dying. They say that freedom is a constant dying. They say that freedom is a constant dying. Oh Lord, we've died so long. We must be free, we must be free. They say that freedom is a constant struggle. They say that freedom is a constant struggle. They say that freedom is a constant struggle. Oh Lord, we struggle so long. We must be free, we must be free.
Hello. I have a question for you as we begin our story time this morning in the service, and that is, I wonder if you have ever watched or participated in a game of baseball or softball. Now, in the games, a member of the team will bat and then will run and try to get to the different bases. And what is the final goal if you are playing? You want to get to home base. And home base is a place where you are safe, right? If you get there first, nobody can get you out. And I think of home base as being a little bit like, in our lives, the ways in which we find spaces where we feel safe, where we feel like we belong. And for some of us, many of us, that is the home we live in. But I'm wondering today about what the difference is between home and just a place where you're living. So I want to invite you to indulge me a little bit, and if you would close your eyes and feel home around you, whatever that means for you. It might be the place you are right now. It might be somewhere else. It might not be a particular place at all, but what is the feeling of home? And sit with that feeling for a minute. What are the sounds that say home to you? What do you smell? What are you hearing? What does it feel like as it surrounds you and holds you? Now, I've been thinking a lot about home this week because 4 years ago, right now, my family was between homes. We were in the process of moving here to Tennessee. So exactly 4 years from tomorrow, if you are watching the service when it's first being shared, is when we arrived here in Tennessee. But we had left California a few days before. It took us a little while to get across the country because we were driving. So Eric and Evan and I left California. But before we did, we spent a little bit of time in the home that we were leaving, in the apartment where we were living in there. And in fact, that had been the only home that our kid, Evan, had ever lived in. It was, he came home from the hospital after being born, and we were in that home. And he spent his first 3 years there. And so it was a really kind of a special place for us as well, as the only home we had had as a whole family before. And so before we left, we took some time all together to visit each of the rooms and talk about some of our favorite memories there, what made it home for us, and to say goodbye. It was a little bit of a ritual of acknowledging how much that had been home for us and how much we were going to miss it, and a way of kind of closing that time and recognizing that we were going to be heading towards a new home. So then we got in the car and we drove and we drove and we drove. And then we arrived in Tennessee, right here to this house that I am in right now, sharing the story with you from. And we were home, except it didn't quite feel like home yet. Now, some of us might have lived in the same places for our whole lives. Many of us, I suspect, have moved before. But even if you haven't moved in the place you were living, I bet you have been somewhere new before. Maybe gone to a new school or even a new classroom. You've joined a new community. Or think about the first time you came to TVUC, if you're somebody who has been coming to the church when we were still meeting in our building. When you're there for the first time, it may not really feel like home. I knew this was my new house, this was my new home, this was where I was going to be living, but I wasn't familiar yet. It didn't have my things. It got a little better the next day when the movers arrived and all of our furniture came in and we started unwrapping it and putting them all in the places where we wanted them to be. And in some way, home is always where my family is, and so Eric and Evan were with me, and so there was a little bit of that. But something interesting and unexpected happened. One of the first evenings we were here, I went outside at night, and I heard something. For those of us here in Tennessee, what do we hear at night this time of year in the middle of the summer? We hear those wonderful night sounds of the crickets or katydids. Somebody knows better than I do exactly what they are. But suddenly, it felt different to me. Do you want to know why? My family is from Georgia. I lived in California for more than 20 years, and we've lived in a number of different places. But when I was a kid, we lived in Georgia, near Atlanta, and my family was from there. So that was always my home base, really, where my extended family was, and we went back to visit even when we weren't living there. And so that sound, those Tennessee night sounds, were very similar to the Georgia night sounds. And suddenly, I had this connection in a really deep way with the home of my childhood, which I hadn't anticipated. And over time, it felt more and more like home in more ways, and especially after being here for a while and kind of building my life here. This is still home. This is home in a real way for me, even though there are ways in which I still miss California. But I'm wondering, what is it that makes something home for you? What does it make something home and not just the place where you are? So I'd like to invite you to indulge me again and think about, call forth again that feeling of home for you. But imagine this time that something's off. Something's not quite right. It's like when you get some new clothes, or maybe have been growing some, and you thought when you put the clothes on that they were a good fit, but if you wear them throughout the day after a while, it gets a little uncomfortable. Maybe it's a little too tight in one spot. It doesn't quite fit right. It might be harder in some ways for something to be almost right than to know that it's just not your place, right? That it's not your home. Something that's so close that feels almost right. I wonder if there are ways in which our community is almost home for some of us, and ways in which we could be attuned to making our spaces be truly not just welcoming, because I think welcoming, our focus on welcoming is a really good one, but also sort of implies that people are coming to us as guests, as opposed to coming to a place that is theirs as much as it is ours. And so I'd like to invite you this week to think about, what is it that makes something home for you? What is it that makes the place you're living home? What is it that makes your communities feel like home? And how can we work together to build that home into an even wider and wider and wider circle? Thank you so much for sharing this time with me this morning.
Joy. Joys and concerns. Prayers are sometimes a thought, and sometimes thoughts are a prayer. And when we send light out to someone, we're sending out a warmth that we have them in our thoughts, we're holding them in our hearts and hoping that things will go well for them. Because we're moving to a different format, I thought in our newsletter, I thought that I would read all of the names that we've had in the past 2 weeks, just to make sure I've covered everybody, and so that in the weeks to come, that we'll be able to just do a running list, so that you will know to hold these people and send them light. Rhiannon Dorsey, her baby niece, Fiona Catherine, was born. Cynthia Crosby is successfully healing, and I asked you to keep her in your prayers. Althea Bernstein is a UU member in Wisconsin who was a victim of a hate crime, and she asked that if you wish to contribute to different organizations that have been listed in our newsletter. Nina Lee Braden is healing at home from a pelvis injury. Jan Barber, who is not a member here because she's the visitation minister at Second Presbyterian, but her brother, Charles Barber, who is our music assistant, is an amazing person, and they both need your prayers. Their niece, or in her case, her grandchild, is not doing well, and so we ask you to keep them in prayer. Also, Bill Pierce, who lost an uncle, John Charles Pierce, please keep Bill in your prayers. Kate Benson is about to have knee replacement surgery, and I ask you to know that she says cards, emails, and calls are welcome. Norman Rosh has passed, and may you hold his family in your thoughts, and to remember him as he went about doing great things within the church. And last but not least, Jim Hartzell's mother is back home with her husband Gilbert. Barbara is recovering from the many surgeries she's had, and she is back home and with her husband of many years in a house that they've lived in together. So, guys, please remember everybody, and please hold a prayer for everyone that you think about that just passes in your mind, because in these days it's easy to forget that we all need to have someone reach out to us and talk with us. Have a good day. Enjoy.
Hi, thank you for wearing your mask. To me, wearing your mask is an act of love, and that's how I see it. This morning, we want to introduce our reading, and especially I want to say good morning to my friends who are members and supporters of Tennessee Valley, and good morning to my friends and loved ones from wherever you just happen to be joining us from, and especially Abundant Love Congregation. I'm introducing our reading this morning for several reasons. The first is rather practical. Parents, we need to tell you that our reading this morning is an adult reading. So if you have little ears there that you don't necessarily want to hear adult topics, you might want to go ahead and give them something else to listen to right now, or help them find something else to do. And I love them, and I'm very sorry about that, but we needed to let you know that. Secondly, it's rather practical. We've done as much editing as we could without changing the meaning of the reading and the impact of the words, but it's still not a family-friendly reading. And I take responsibility for that. I know that our community, especially at Tennessee Valley, has children and youth who are a vital part of it. And I love that. I'm leaning also on two concepts with our reading this morning. One is the freedom of the pulpit, because you've already heard this reading or a portion of the article that we're referencing from Mr. Ailes, a theater critic, last week. And our liberal values, secondly, tell us that we can find truth and meaning in many sources of text. As Unitarian Universalists, we're not wedded to anything that is any one or two particular kinds of text. So if we find something that brings us meaning, we can use it. And I've chosen to do that this morning with the article Homecoming from the June 29th, 2020 issue of the New Yorker magazine. There is a name also mentioned in the article, and it's a reference to a teenager, Richard Ross, who was shot in 1967. In 1967, for running from an officer of the law. He's a black teenager, and he was suspected of having mugged someone. And the shooting sparked riots in the part of New York where Mr. Ailes, our writer, was growing up. I chose, with the input of our wonderful worship team here at Tennessee Valley, to go ahead and speak based on this article from Mr. Ailes, because it expresses emotions and experiences that I have lived as a black man and as a black gay man. It was brought to both Reverend Jametta Alston and myself by a straight, cisgendered man who lived in New York City. That's your own Charles Barber. Charles explained how this reading moved him and how he wanted to share it. And I knew he had discovered a testament that spoke to him particular to this time that we're living. So Charles, thank you for sharing this with us, and I hope you enjoy this reading.
The truth is that nothing is impersonal when it comes to racism or the will to subjugate. Every act of racism is a deeply personal act with an end result, the unmooring diminishment of the person who is the target. If you have suffered that kind of erasure, you are less likely to know who you are or where you live. My brother has suggested that we moved so much when we were kids because our mother kept looking for safety. I don't remember exactly how many times we moved. In those days, my focus was on trying to win people over, the better to protect my family, or, silently, trying to fend off homophobia, the better to protect myself. At present, I live in a predominantly white neighborhood in Manhattan. For a number of reasons, I was stuck at home when the demonstration started downtown last month. Panic set in when I heard the helicopters flying low and the police sirens going. I was convinced that the cops would run across my roof, and seeing my black behind sitting in an apartment in a neighborhood where I had no business being would shoot me dead. I asked a white male friend to come and be with me. What I felt during that first wave of panic was a muscle memory of riots and rootlessness. The thought of those cops took away my feeling of being at home in my home. The real as hell feelings I had in my apartment that evening before my friend got there were also a metaphor, but I don't know for what kind of story. And if it is all a story, where do I put Richard Ross? Where do I put George Floyd, whose murder by a white police officer in Minneapolis launched those demonstrations? And now, the effects of our segregated democracy are happening to you. And now you can see or understand that all along I've been trying to get along just like you, the way Ma taught me, to be independent and help my chosen family. I've tried to make a living at something I love and to explore the intricacies of love just like you. I've lost friends and forgotten to pay a credit card bill just like you. But I wasn't allowed to be like you. And now my other is happening to you. Now degradation and moral compromise and your body breaking down are happening to you. Because Donald Trump has happened to you. OxyContin has happened to you. Broken families have happened to you. Gun violence in schools, in supermarkets, in movie theaters, at concerts has happened to you, along with riots and frustration. And cops who can't pass up an opportunity to flash their guns and their batons in your presence, even as you search for home, even as the dream comes tumbling, tumbling, tumbling down.
Thank you for joining us this morning at TVUUC. My name is Claudia Presley, and I'm the Director of Administration here. Today is a designated offering Sunday. That means that any contributions that come in today will go to our designated offering area, which is the community gardens of TVUUC. So we invite you to give, and to give generously if you are able to. 100% of that contribution, unless it is designated as a pledge, will go to the community gardens of TVUUC. The way you can give is to go to tvuuc.org/give, or you can text give to the number 73256, type in TVUUC, and then the amount that you would like to give. Once again, thank you for joining us, and have a great Sunday.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We cannot rest until it comes.
Until the killing of black men, black mother sons, is as important as the killing of all men, all mother sons. That which touches me most is that I had a chance to work with people, passing on to others that which was passed on to me, singing, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. To me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. And if I could shed some light as they carry us through the gale, the older I get, the better I know that the secret of my going on is when the reins are in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm, singing, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. I said, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Not needing to clutch the power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be one in the number as we stand against tyranny. Well, struggling myself don't mean a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others to stand up and fight is the only way our struggle will survive. Singing, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. I said, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult because I'll bow to no man's word. Singing, we who believe in freedom cannot rest. Oh yes, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. One more time. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. I said, we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes.
Where have we landed in 2020? Well, we're here in the midst of a pandemic with the wrong kind of federal leadership. And now, because of the pressure cooker that is our lives, it's turned up high. And people in authority who get satisfaction from abusing power all over our social media and televisions are being caught in the act, and they don't care. While we're reacting and enacting from frustration and emotional broiler that is currently what we're living in. But you knew that. And our beloved Charles Barber has found a well-written article from the New Yorker magazine that tells us about a rich African-American gay man coming to terms with his past and the current state of being and our national wrestling with racism, while helicopters are hovering over his Upper East Side apartment in New York City during a riot. during a protest or a march. We're not sure it's a riot. We just know that helicopters are hovering around his window in his Upper East Village or Upper East Side Manhattan apartment. And I know how he felt in the panic. I have no idea how it felt to sign a lease or a mortgage on his apartment or to write based on just going to theater. That's his regular job. He's a theater critic in a world-class publication and other publications in the world's theater capital, New York, New York. And I have no idea what his daily life is like. I'd love to know. I just adore the penthouse view. You know the rest. But I can tell you as a black gay man what terror feels like when you have to put aside Mr. Ailes and my privilege and come to terms with the reality of what it feels like to wonder, do I belong as another black man right now during this pandemic? Panic is not logical. Panic is based on fear and survival. It's the opposite of love and courage. I am deliberately not discussing this morning our poor or economically challenged young black men killed by police. I'm talking about what systematic racism feels like to men who would fit comfortably in our pews of most UUs like I do. I know what it feels like to be in a foreign country outside the tourist area and to have what would be an argument, the kind of disagreement that happens in a restaurant between any couple. How you and your partner both differently cope with the demands of the day. I want to dine. And David wanted us to eat in a hurry so that we could be the first ones on the bus. No big deal, right? No big worry. But I got so upset at our argument, the fear crept in from some point while I was angry. I was a lone black gay man on that bus, on that tour. And usually that's not a problem for us to disagree about something in a restaurant. I mean, we've been together a long time. But I'm not in Decatur where somebody, if I take a notion, to walk home will recognize me and ask me, Duncan, what are you doing walking home? And inquire about why I'm walking home. I'm not in Decatur, so if I stomp out of the restaurant, and I'm not proposing that I was going to do that, but I could do that and get on a bus and maybe even beat David home. I'm black, gay, and in France. And I'm in some old outskirts outside of Paris, the Loire Valley, not even in Paris. And I don't know anybody. I'm gay and I don't speak French well enough to get back to our hotel. And most importantly, I have no idea how the French countryside feels about black Americans, black gays, or any combination of those choices or separately. And the fear is not logical, y'all. It doesn't have to be, but it feels real to me. And then the worst happens. The worst message that comes when you feel like this. There are no Teagues within 1,000 miles that I know of. And then David looks differently, and all our years together are smashed into my dependence on his willingness to stay with me right then. And I'm afraid now, and I'm panicked, and I don't belong here. Why did I let myself go to Paris? And on and on. And this is the part where both the writer and I share. I don't belong here. No love can save us, no sense of courage. Now, some of you are trying desperately to find yourself in this story or to find a time in your own story when you had this kind of terror. And I'm going to ask you to wait and just stay with us in this moment, unless you're African American. This is our time to stay in our story, me and Mr. Ailes, and just stay in our craziness for just a little moment later. We, Mr. Ailes and I, and possibly at any point in time, are part of 2 or 3 categories that might be despised for no reason other than the fact that we're present. David and I had an encounter similar to this in Amsterdam. One of a party of Texans who were in our hotel lobby after we came back from lunch had to let David and I know loud enough how he felt about men like us. As if I flew all the way to Holland to hear his problem. His problem that David and I didn't belong anywhere near him. Really. Even if I graduated as an independent student from a top-rated Catholic college in the Midwest, and then I graduated with a graduate degree from one of the best Methodist schools in the country, Candler School of Theology at Emory University here in Atlanta. I am revered for who I am and what I have done in Atlanta and some other places. But if people like this Texan don't know and don't care, and really don't care, it makes no difference. I am in that moment not a kid in trouble running from the cop, but it doesn't matter. I don't belong there. David and I don't belong there in his mind. Even with a passport and paid tickets and hotel reservations, as valid as his. His privilege says that he gets to determine who belongs where. The police in Cambridge also arrested Dr. Henry Louis Gates at his home because, like many of us, he walked out and left his keys and locked the door. Yes, Henry Louis Gates from Finding Our Roots, a small African-American Harvard professor, Harvard professor, kind of mature to be a burglar. But the police could not fathom that it wasn't his home he was breaking into. And really, there's a photograph of him in handcuffs on his own front porch. You want to tell me there wasn't some kind of proof that that was his home? Like a driver's license? And who among the neighbors called the police on him that didn't know him? Or did they really know him and not care? Was it that he didn't belong there, so it didn't matter who he was? Mr. Ailes gives an example after example after example at the end of the article of incidents like this where he feels he must forgive racist acts according to the way his mom brought him up. Statements by people in power. And if he chooses to call them out on their racism, then he's choosing to put their powerful relationship in jeopardy. How they might influence his career as a theater critic in New York City. And this is why I'm asking you to stay in this black story with a little gay fringe. Have folks asked you to deny their racism, their oppressing other people, and the diminishment of your personhood? I can hear many different groups of you saying, yes, they did. I hear women in the room saying, amen, Duncan, they did. I hear disabled people in the room saying, yes, Duncan, they did. And they even made it so much that I don't belong there, they made sure I couldn't even get in the building. Yes, they did. And here's a question. Where do you belong? What kind of place do you want to create for people who are not like you so they feel like they belong? Abundant love, this is our question this morning, just as much as Tennessee Valley. And Tennessee Valley, don't worry about me. I have stake in Tennessee Valley. Y'all already made me a part of the community. I'm fine. I got folks up there who love me, and I love y'all. We're cool. You've proven to me that I'm welcomed in the hills of East Tennessee when I didn't know nothing about it. And I didn't get it confused. I knew I wasn't in Nashville, and I sure wasn't in Memphis. I was in East Tennessee. And I thank you for that. But see, this is not about individual welcomes. This is about systems. Because it is the systems that embed fear in us so much that even if I'm in the place I have longed to go to for the whole entirety of my life, with the man I love the most, there's this tiny embedded message. When you get too upset or when you get scared, who told you that you could be this far from where you belong? Ain't nobody over here like you. Now you have done it. For your further investigation into this topic, I asked you to look at a book called Whistling Vivaldi, and also to explore the work of Dr. Pauline Rose Clance. She actually helped found the First Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta with her husband and her partner. And she's the author of the work around the imposter syndrome. Now I got folks with me. I can feel it. That especially for people who are on the margins, when we're the first to arrive in a place that we have deserved, that we're even honored to be in, we don't feel like we belong there because culturally it's not the same. And then there are those who are already established in that place, who make it part of their business to let you know that though you somehow got here, you don't really belong here. And it makes us feel like we're an imposter in our own bodies, in our own achievements. And it can even affect your grades. It can affect your ability to do what you want, to accomplish what you want. I grew up singing. I did a jury in front of an all-white juror for a music department. I had never sung for a jury. I had never competed with my voice before. I'd only sung in church, and you couldn't hear my baritone voice. And I promise you, there had never been a time in church when you couldn't hear me sing, even if you didn't want to. So the imposter syndrome is part of this, but it's not all of it. I just bring that up so you have somewhere else to go to dig deeper into this. But I'm not really concerned about your intellectual knowledge of this topic this morning. I'm concerned about your heart and our collective heart and what decision we make about what messages we give about where you belong and where do I belong. And where do people who don't look like us belong when they come to be a part of our loving, courageous communities? I'm talking about when we are troubled by the identity of someone that we haven't learned how to let into our circles. And if we did, we must remind them of their rightful place. Well, Duncan, I'm talking about racism and the oppression that triggers a prize-winning author, a wealthy, mature man in his Upper East Side apartment to shrink into panic and fear that he doesn't belong in his own home, thrown back in time in his childhood to all that had happened. I'm asking this morning that we determine this morning that our love is so profound that we're not just the white guy he called over to the apartment to help him. We're already there. I'm talking about that we directly approach systematically all the stuff that put that fear in Mr. Ailes in the first place. All that stuff that I somehow internalized and said, you don't really belong in the Loire Valley. And if David leaves you, you are stuck. That's the systematic stuff I'm trying to address this morning. We have a moment in history right now, a gift of time and space to finally talk about this mastodon of racism that's been sitting in the living room. Can you tell me how we can get where I belong this morning? Is it where we are surrounded by courageous beloveds? Not folks who have to be imposters so they fit in. So may our love be so profound that nobody feels that. Nobody. May our love be so this morning. Amen. Charles, thank you so much for bringing this reading to us.
Somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Oh, sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like justice. Somebody's calling my name. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Soon, one morning, death come creeping in my room. Soon, one morning, death come creeping in my room. Soon, one morning, death come creeping in my room. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? I'm so glad struggle don't last always. I'm so glad struggle don't last always. I'm so glad trouble don't last always. Oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do? Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush. Oh my Lord, what shall I do?
Thank you again for joining us for worship. Our closing words are from actually a friend now of mine, Darnell L. Moore, from his memoir, No Ashes in the Fire, Coming of Age, Black and Free in America. Darnell says in the closing of his book, I am more hopeful than ever before, not because I believe America will get over its abusive relationship with black people. No, I am hopeful because I have faith in black liberation, which is to say, the freedom we dream and practice when we refuse to set fire to another's potential to love, to laugh, to live. May this be a good week for you to love, to laugh, and live courageously. Thank you very much for having me.
The ritual of companionship is a cure for all of us. To be with people we love, to be with people that we laugh with, the people that we share joy with. Turn and greet your neighbor, whether you do it by a phone call later today, a telephone message, an email, a text. All I've got to say is greet your neighbor. Goodbye, and have a grateful and joyful and fun week.